Greetings, it is I, Tantus now, Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue my discussion on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, the second edition of AD&D. Alright, we were talking about some movement over land, and we talked about, of course, traveling around on mounts, on horses or other things. Let's continue where we were just then. So, now I'm on my mounted horseback, I'm on my whatever animal I'm traveling on. The fact is, you don't want to be forced to deal with grooming and all that material that deals directly with your animal. Unless you specifically choose to do it, it's kind of boring and you don't want to do it. But there are some important things you're going to have to remember about whatever animal you're traveling on. It's going to have some basic needs. Basic things that you will have to take care of to, well, keep it alive and keep you traveling on it wherever you're going. The fact is, you will look into the book here at each of the specific animals. It lists a bunch of the common animals here and gives information on each of them, on how you look after them, how you take care of them, kind of things you have to feed, kind of places you have to rest. Information like this which will allow you to make sure you're understanding what you need to do to look after the animal. Because as much as it's your mount, it's also to a great degree your pet. And you have to look after it and make sure it stays alive so that it keeps you traveling from A to B successfully over and over again. Now, there is an important thing to say here. As great as a mount might be, being better than yourself when it comes to carrying or taking loads, it's still limited. It can only carry so much. Here's where vehicles come in. Vehicles open up things. They have usually greater capacity to carry a larger amount of stuff over a larger period of time. And they oftentimes work with your mounted animals. Well, in this case, your animals. Things like carts and wagons are often used by people to travel from one village to next, or especially traders, to bring their supplies. A chariot might be something that a rich person would have, or an item of war. And if you're in a terrain that's filled with ice or snow, you might find some kind of sled or something similar. Dog sleds, for example, that will take you and your supplies over a period of terrain. Each vehicle itself has its own rules for the kind of travel it can make in a day, the kind of load it will take, animals that you'll be working with it, all the details you know, and some of this is listed within the book to let you know about them. But when we look to vehicles, because, again, we are looking at a lot of this information, you have to think about terrain. The fact is that each of these vehicles is best suited for a type of terrain. If I'm not in that type of terrain, I don't travel as effective. A wagon or a cart is better suited for flat, open land, something like roads and fields. If I take it up to the mountains, now I could still travel to the mountains a little slower, maybe use mountain passes or valleys, kind of find my way to maneuver. But if I hit something like a forest, I'm dead. I can't travel through that forest. I can't move forward there. It's not built for that. So you can see how there are limitations on these vehicles based on where you're traveling. Things like roads, if they're cut through an area, forest, mountain, etc., that makes it easy for this cart to travel because that's at least a step in the right direction for the cart. Another example will of course be a sled. It's good for ice and snow, but as soon as you're on dirt, it just won't work. Now, there is an important optional rule that when we're looking at terrain, we have to look at its effects on your movement. In general, on anything from you, your vehicle, or your animal, your mount. The fact is, when we're looking short term, it is completely optional to use terrain to affect you. If you really look at short-term travel, terrain doesn't do a lot for you. This is combat, this is rounds, this is smaller amounts of distance that you're traveling. This could have an effect, and that's one of those things about it. But on normal circumstances, it will be extreme terrain which will have an effect on you. But if you do look for the option of having terrain affect short term, there is a chart in the book which allows you to have an idea of what it will do to your movement rate and affect it. It is very important to note that should you travel through multiple types of terrain in the course of a turn, because it can happen even on short turn, whatever is the worst terrain is what you're going to apply to your movement. Whatever is the hardest for you to travel through will affect you the entire turn. Similar, we do have to talk about then darkness and ice. These are things that will slow you down. Now, we kind of can talk about this in relation to your normal movements, and it affects all movements the same. And it will be just the same, doesn't matter if you're on a vehicle, you're on a horse, you're on your feet, it will affect you the basic kind of way. It will not do a lot, it'll slow you down at most. And though you can travel a little quicker, you can push yourself through this terrain, in this case, you do have to worry about a few things. You have to make a dexterity check each round, that if you fail it, well, you've tripped. If you're in the darkness, this means there's something in dark that you haven't seen, you trip over it. If it's on the ice, it was a patch a little slippier than you thought, you slip on it. If you are in an area of perfect darkness, area where you can't see anything at all, you can't navigate either. In this case, it will be random the direction that you're going, and your DM will roll for that random direction. They will use a d12. From 1 to 4, well, you're on course. You're doing good. From 5 to 8, I'm veering to the right. From 9 to 12, I'm veering to my left. And it will be up to your DM to track where you're going in this entire thing as you kind of wander around. And each time you're moving, they check. Because the fact is, without any kind of idea of where you're going, you just wander. And you might get lucky where you're going. Now, where terrain really comes in is the long-term movement. At this point in time, yes, terrain has a significant effect on how fast you're going. If you're in a terrain for a large period, it's going to do its thing and affect me. There are some important notes here. Because long-term could go over a good number of miles, you can travel in different types of terrain. You can't use the same rules as we used on short-term. A great example would be this. If I'm in a mountain for 1 hour of my travel today, and then on open fields for the next 5, would it be appropriate to have the penalties for traveling through the mountain apply for me the entire time? No, and people will complain if you do this. What you're going to have to do, which is an unfortunate thing, is look hour by hour. As you travel, effectively you have to look at it. By mile, by hour. Whatever distance, whatever terrain they're in, you have to apply it as they go, because it's unpredictable the changes that might occur as they go from one place to the next. You have to look at by mile, there is a modifier based upon your vehicle, your bounce, your character's movement speed, that effectively you take away from that total movement they can do in the course of a turn. They can travel X number of miles in this terrain because the terrain modifier might be only 1, but if the terrain modifier is 2, it's half of that time. So each time they travel a mile, you use the terrain modifier, you subtract it from their total movement that they can take in a day, movement rate, and there you go. Simple, effective way of measuring that I can travel long term without so much problems. And this is actually a good way that you can avoid those generalizations that work in short term, but definitely not here in long term. But that's it for today. So we finished up talking about mounts with caring for them and moved into talking about vehicles, in particular how vehicles react to terrain, both on the short and the long. In the next episode, we're going to talk about roads and what they do for your vehicles and travels, obstacles that might come in your way, and move into talking about moving on water. Because water mounts, water vehicles exist, and there might be a point in time where you might have to go sailing across the ocean for one of your games. It'll be important to know about that. But I hope you have a great day, and of course, until the next time, I bid you farewell.